Remember this bloke, Leah Thomas? He started swimming in collegiate swimming competitions in the United States and won everything. Leah Thomas had been a very, very average bloke swimming. Then he just put on a girl's swimsuit and said he was a Sheila and was allowed to compete because it was at the height of the transgender madness and political correct madness around the world. Now Leah Thomas has thankfully been banned from competing in the Olympics, took it to court, lost the case. Now Leah Thomas's former teammate demands an apology for being forced to undress with him 18 times a week after he lost his legal battle to compete in women's events at the Olympics. Paula Scanlon has welcomed the news that her former teammate Leah Thomas will not be allowed at the Olympic Games and claims she should receive an apology for being forced to undress with the transgender athlete 18 times a week. It was announced on Wednesday afternoon that the 25-year-old swimmer would not be permitted to compete in the Olympic Games after losing her legal battle to have the rules barring her potential involvement overturned. And could I just say, generally it would seem to me around the world that this madness seems to be in recession. That we are realising that a guy saying he's a Sheila and then competing against women in sport is grossly unfair and a little bit perverted and odd. Sorry, it just is. That's to the average person, to the vast majority of people, it's a little bit odd. But the new government promised, in fact, it said quite clearly that it was going to ensure that this craziness didn't continue and it would defund sports that did not protect particularly women's sports. There don't seem a whole lot of women who want to compete against men. It's funny that, isn't it? But it said it would basically defund sports, high-performance sports, that continued with this madness. But it would appear that due to lobbying from, I think it's the Sports Foundation, the government might be going soft on that. To discuss this more, we're joined by Rowena Edge, who is from Save Women's Sport Australasia. Ro, nice to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Sean.
All right, so what's been going on?
Oh, look, I don't know. I just think this reeks of government bureaucrats trying to create problems for this coalition government by feeding a busy minister inaccurate information. I got a letter from Chris Bishop a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned in it that he was going to continue with Sport New Zealand's guiding principles. They weren't going to be removed because he said there were exemptions in it for fairness and safety in relation to female sport. There's not. He's obviously never read the guidelines. Okay,
so hang on. Whoa. Let's just not get ahead of it. For those who've come in late, what was, prior to the change of government, the policy of Sport New Zealand?
So Sport New Zealand wrote transgender guidelines, and which they released in December 22 from memory. And in those guidelines, it's all about inclusion, the entire focus. Not once anywhere does it mention issues in relation to fairness and safety of females by allowing males to compete in female sport, or the fact that there is actually a provision in the Human Rights Act for single-sex sports. And even worse still, the guidelines go on to say that if female athletes raise concerns or objections about a male competing in female sport, then they should consider disciplining them.
So that is actually an aggressively pro-transgender sport position, isn't it?
Yeah, there is nothing in there that even considers the feelings, fairness, safety and opportunities for female athletes. Nothing at all.
All right. So what was your belief as to what the new government and its component parts promised?
Well, they promised that publicly funded sports had to ensure fairness of competition that wasn't prioritised by rules relating to gender. So our interpretation of that is that these guiding principles would be removed and new guidelines would be created to ensure that if you were a publicly funded sport, you needed to protect the female category. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah. You've sent me some background stuff, which I've read. It would seem to me that Raylene Castles, the woman who destroyed Australian rugby, and is now brought over here to run the Sport Foundation, Raylene Castles is running this, but she does seem to be saying this is primarily an issue at community sport level, not at the elite Olympic level, that they're going to try and have inclusion at, if you like, a community sport level.
Yeah, but community sport is literally every part of sport until you represent your country. It's your regional and national tournaments. It encompasses so much. So basically what Raylene Castle's saying is that, fair competition matters at elite level, but it does not matter at community level for females. Where a female's going to have the pathways if males are allowed to take them in their sport? We're seeing in Australia, when you want to see where this goes, in Australia there's one women's football team that has 5 men in it now. They're cleaning up the competition. They're injuring female football players, and female footballers, if they complain, they're disciplined. If their team wants to withdraw, they're fined $500, and they're threatened not to go to the media. We've got sports in New Zealand now. This is what happens when the slippery slope of this gender woohoo nonsense. We've got sports in New Zealand now that you don't have to identify as a woman to participate in female sport. There's a new term called gender expansive, and it means that blokes are just
that sounds like bullshit, Rose. Sorry. What, gender expansive?
Gender expansive. There was a tournament, a roller derby tournament in Adelaide last week that a New Zealand female team participated in. There were numerous males playing in opposition teams. They all just identified as not as men. But they're all men, they're bearded blokes who were aggressive. Yep, it is.
Well, have you been to the politicians who promised you all this, Ro? Andy Foster, what's he doing? What's Chris Bishop doing?
Well, Chris Bishop refuses to meet with me. I've been trying to get a meeting with him since they got into government. He just will not give me a meeting. I've met with Andy Foster. Last I heard, he was going to be working on this, but when I got Chris Bishop's letter a few weeks ago, I forwarded it to them. It was budget week, so I understood why they couldn't get back to me then. Yeah. But, I've had nothing back. And it's interesting, Winston Peters was meant to be interviewed on News Talk ZB this morning and didn't front. I would say that New Zealand First have been blindsided by this. I hope so, because I can't imagine after campaigning so hard on this that they would renege on a policy so easily.
So you believe that they have reneged, that they are not going to take action. And I think there should be a new term for this, Ro. I think it should be called transgender cheating in sport. It is cheating. Yeah, transgender cheating in sport at all levels, yeah.
But this issue only impacts female sport.